strength, stoicism, dominance. Grr. The concept of the big daddy, the alpha male, has been targeting straight boys and straight boys for a while now. But this daddy masculinity that's built on male domination, who exactly is it for? Because if the super popular social media alpha bro influencers are anything to go by, it seems to be a lot of dudes jerking each other off. As studies are showing, the supremacist daddy energy is getting dudes laid less and less. Now, anyone who's ever met an emotionally stunted man with an inferiority complex knows that his self-hatred is rooted in daddy issues. The model is simple. You take a domineering patriarch at home, often with a submissive and enabling mother, and you reinforce it with the rest of the patriarchs out in greater society who are trying to get you to buy into their male supremacy so that they can maintain their male hegemony. This patriarchal masculinity model breaks little boys. It leaves them feeling unsafe, unworthy, and unloved. Without rejecting this male supremacy model and mindset, out into the world the broken baby boys go, on but one of two paths. Either they circle back to their daddy's masculinity model and repeat it by creating yet another generation of broken men by making both their children and their community feel unsafe, unworthy, and unloved. No, it's great. Just take that trauma and stuff it way down. It's not like it's gonna bubble out like violence or pure dysfunction. Everyone loves a sociopath. Or they reject daddy's patriarchal masculinity model and end up adrift because there still isn't enough community or fraternal support for dudes who reject locker room talk. Well, daddies, should you want to get out of this toxic self-hating domination loop, and if you don't mind listening to some women and queers, then radical, revolutionary, intersectional queens feminism has some solutions for you. Because if this performance of supremacy masculinity is only working with bros, and if it's leaving you broken and isolated and unloved, then what the fuck are you doing, daddy?
Tea.
On today's Daddy's Day episode of the Queen's Tea, we are talking all things daddy. That's right, we're talking about fatherhood, masculinity, and your favorite P word, patriarchy. First, we'll set the scene with a history of patriarchy, because that's right, it's not a given. And for our top daddy tea, we'll talk about some daddies in the news, and spoiler alert, it's not going well. Then Mama D will spill the real tea about masculinity and why even people who are trying to help and offer new models of masculinity, such as Richard Reeves with his book of Boys and Men, are still missing the point. Because if your idea of masculinity is still gendered, then it is still merely a tool for patriarchy and male supremacy. And this is the great ailment of both women and men these days. Lastly, we'll head over to McCarran Park in Brooklyn and talk to some real-life daddies about their experiences with and their opinions on all things fatherhood. Now, it's time for the Queen's Tea.
Tea with a cup of tea.
Ooh, tea time.
Tea.
What's the tea, sis?
No tea, no shade.
Hot tea. Tea.
Queens.
Hello, and welcome to the Daddy's Day episode of the Queen's Tea. I'm Mama D, and happy Daddy's Day to all the daddies out there who celebrate, who are good ones. Now, before we get into the meat of our episode, let's set the scene. The history of Daddy's Day, or as it's more conventionally known, Father's Day, goes back to around 1909. Some woman out in Spokane, Washington, named Sonora Smart Dodd, who was raising all of her younger siblings with her dad, because I guess her mother died at some point, heard about the newly recognized Mother's Day, and she was like, let's acknowledge daddies. The next year in 1910, she created Father's Day, and it gradually became a nationwide celebration. In 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed a presidential proclamation, declaring that the third Sunday of June would be Father's Day. And then in 1972, President Nixon established a permanent national observance of Father's Day to be held that same third Sunday of every June every year. June has also become Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's almost like there's some kind of a connection between men's decreasing mental health and this whole idea of the dominant daddy and patriarchy. The history of Daddies Day goes back about 100 years, but the history of patriarchy goes back way farther. This history of patriarchy, we have some notes. First, let's note that male dominance and male supremacy, these are not naturally dictated or ingrained phenomena. Male supremacy is a political and historical phenomenon with both a beginning and, let's hope, an end. Once upon a time, reaching back all the way 25,000 BCE into the Paleolithic era, the Old Stone Age, a pre-human history. And throughout the Neolithic era, which is the New Stone Age, this period is the one that marked the development of agriculture and societies becoming more settled. All over the world, different peoples and civilizations revered female creation goddesses, female deities, mother goddesses. They had different names, but they all did this. And this goddess worship lasted through the creation of patriarchy, even till around 500-600 CE. And one can argue that the witch hunts that took place during the establishment of capitalism in the European continent and around in adjacent areas from around 1300 to 1600 CE, that this was a persecution of people still worshiping female deities. In her 1976 book, When God Was a Woman, Merlin Stone writes, upon closer scrutiny, it becomes clear that so many of the names used in diverse areas were simply various titles of the great goddess: Queen of Heaven, Lady of the High Place, Celestial Ruler, Lady of the Universe. We are not, however, confronting a confusing myriad of deities, but a variety of titles resulting from diverse languages and dialects, yet each referring to a most familiar and similar divinity. And doesn't this make sense? Doesn't it make sense that people before the advent of modern science even understood creation to be an act of females, since that's what they saw when new life would be birthed? So then, how did we end up with patriarchy? Male supremacy, or patriarchy, began with little changes over many years. In her 1986 book, The Creation of Patriarchy, Gerda Lerner writes, the period of the establishment of patriarchy was not one event, but a process developing over a period of nearly 2,500 years, lasting till about 600 CE. There were a few main forces behind this reorientation, from worshiping the divine feminine and the mother goddess to submitting to daddies. As societies became more settled and agriculture began to develop, a phenomenon attributed mostly to women, they began to transition away from being primarily kin-based on the mother's side and through the family's lines to being class-based. Agriculture created surplus for the first time, and so suddenly there were the haves and the have-nots. And this triggered something, because hoarding began. This idea of taking and thieving and colonizing began. If you had more surplus, suddenly, I don't know, you were living a little larger. Men also began to control and appropriate women's sexual and reproductive capacities, another extension of this idea of surplus. And this really began the shift away from tracking families through the mother's line, known as matrilineal descent, to patrilineal descent, where we track families through the dad's lines. And now the kids are living with the dads in the dad's household. Kids still having their father's names, us still having our father's names. This is an example of this patrilineal descent at work still to this day. It wasn't always like this. Men learned to practice dominance over others, not just through controlling reproduction and lineages within their own group, but also through the institutionalization of slavery, through the enslavement of conquered people's women. As societies got settled, and with this aesthetic of domination, of creating surplus so as to establish your supremacy and your dominance over other people, Think about it. You go and you pick off the women of people you're conquering so that you can increase your capacity to expand your own group's numbers. More hoarding, more supremacy, more domination. You're getting the idea. And of course, in this, we can see the process of colonization really taking root. Daddy also became dominant as men started to rewrite the myths and religions and cultural practices of their time. And remember, they used to center the divine goddess and women. And they rewrote everything in a way so as to reinforce their newfound higher power statuses. Merlin Stone writes, again in When God Was a Woman, myths present ideas that guide perception, conditioning us to think and even perceive in a particular way. So these myths, these religions were essential to convincing people of what should and should not be. In addition to daddy gods, in the book of Genesis, through the reappropriation of a lot of imagery that was powerful and good in the goddess religions, the apple, snakes, knowledge, creation, men wrote that Eve, in her womanly hubris, caused the expulsion of Adam and Eve and all humankind from the kingdom of paradise, and therefore she forced Daddy God to decree that women must submit to the dominance of man. So, by page 3 of the 1,000+ pages of the Bible, the Daddy God religions established the inferiority of women and the supremacy of man. In addition to this not being an actual divine situation, do we really think this was a coincidence? Daddy gods? No, it was political. Because when you're operating within an aesthetic of supremacy, you change the myth to reinforce what will provide you with more power. So, our takeaway from the emergence of patriarchy as civilizations began to settle in is that, one, obviously it wasn't biological since before its emergence it didn't exist. 2, the institutionalization of patriarchy was violence incarnate. 3, that we trace family lines through males and give children daddy's name is a vestige of this violent colonization of reproduction by males. And lastly, where there is a daddy god, there is an agenda. There are politics, and these are the politics of male supremacy. And we're all still drowning in it. Happy Daddy's Day.
Tea with a cup of tea.
Tea time.
Tea.
What's the tea, sis?
No tea, no shade.
Hot tea. Tea.
Queens.
And now it's time for the Queen's Top Tea. Masculinity in the news. In addition to all of the douchebags that come across our social media feed who are trafficking in like this male supremacy, masculinity nonsense, on the Honestly with Barry Weiss podcast in May, Jerry Seinfeld was lamenting about how he misses dominant masculinity in society from the days of his youth, saying, "I like a real man." He says, there's another element there that I think is the key element, no idea what he's talking about, and that is an agreed upon hierarchy, which I think is absolutely vaporized in today's moment. And I think that is why people lean on the car horn and drive in the crazy way that they drive, because we have no sense of hierarchy. And as humans, we don't really feel comfortable like that. What the fuck is he talking about? What's the hierarchy? That no one's allowed to honk at the rich white man in the car next to him? Please. He continued, I really thought when I was in that era, again, it was JFK, it was Muhammad Ali, it was Sean Connery, Howard Cosell, that you can go all the way down there. That's a real man. I want to be like that someday. JFK, who notoriously cheated on his wife all the fucking time. Muhammad Ali, who punched his wife Belinda in the face because he suspected her of cheating. Sean Connery, who in 1965 in Playboy wrote, said, I don't think there's anything particular. I don't know how to do a Sean Connery impression. Fuck. I don't think, what is he, Scottish? I don't know how to do it. Just pretend, okay? You know what he sounds like. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong about hitting a woman. If all other alternatives fail and there has been plenty of warning, if a woman is a bitch or hysterical or bloody-minded continually, then I'll do it. These are the men. Jerry Seinfeld is reminiscing about and espousing as real men from the era that he misses, in which dominant masculinity ran amok. This is the same guy who, at the age of 38, started dating a 17-year-old high school senior named Shoshana Lonstein-Gruce. They dated for 4 years. What's the deal with this white man nostalgia, bro? What, you miss the infrastructure of dominance because you can't establish that yourself in the bedroom, so you have to instead prey on teenagers, Jerry? I mean, you're fucking Jerry Seinfeld. You're rich. You've had a long, successful career. You have a new movie coming out. What is this nostalgia for dominant masculinity other than some need to fill a hole in yourself that's just some fucking, like, lingering inferiority complex? Like, shut the fuck up, man. Get out of here. The other fucking asshole in the news is trafficking in this, like, toxic masculinity domination nonsense is good old, now convicted felon, say it with me, Donald Trump. Doesn't it have a nice ring to it? We get to say that now. So, convicted felon Donald Trump, who is somehow allowed to run for president again. He's trying to appeal now. He already got enough of the fucking problematic white men. Now he's going after the problematic black and Latino men to get those numbers up. So he is trafficking in racialized male supremacy, trying to appeal to black guys and Latino guys in the way that he thinks is best, which is using former convicts and rappers talking about how they're like, anti-law and anti-establishment too. He's trying to get street cred. The guy who grew up in a golden tower and has, like, been rich his whole life and has just been, well, I mean, in one way he has been an actual gangster his whole life, but not in the way that's ever gotten him in trouble until recently. Touching moment. In a Bronx rally in May, the rappers Chef G and Sleepy Hallow were among several guests invited to voice their support for Mr. Trump. What are you doing, guys? Seriously? The presumptive Republican presidential nominee. It's true, he's not officially the Republican nominee until after the RNC convention in July. Stay tuned. I mean, he owns the entire party, so what are the odds that he's not going to get the nomination? After Chef G and Sleepy Hallow did their little thing, Mr. Trump expressed gratitude and then complimented Chef G's glittering jewel-encrusted grill. I like those teeth. I want to find out where you did it. I got to get my teeth like that. Well, don't worry, Donald. That could very well happen to you when you're in Rikers. We have to remember that when we talk about patriarchal male supremacy, masculinity, this whole huge mechanism that helps men structurally have supremacy over other people, we have to remember that it's inherently racialized, certainly in America. And what we really mean by male supremacy and patriarchy in America is white male supremacy and white patriarchy. So here's Trump with his little fucking rapper friends going out and trying to appeal to these men of color who are not structurally in the same place as Trump with his male supremacy, who actually are less enfranchised in this whole horrible domination scheme because of their intersecting issues of race, whether they're black or Latino, because this country's just so fucking nice. They're not white, right? That's the point. He's trying to appeal to them and trying to make them think that his white male supremacy is their own. And really, anything, first of all, it's Trump, so anything he does is just gonna benefit him. But even if he were like trying to be the tide that lifts all white boats, it still wouldn't include these fucking guys. It's another con job from the felon. Let's just look at a few statistics about wealth distribution in America. In 2021, white households comprised 65.3% of all US households, but held 80% of the total wealth. Black households made up 13.6% of all households, but held only 4.7% of the wealth. Look at that gap. That's disgusting. This system, black men, Latino men, it is not helping you, it's benefiting the white man. Come on. Another statistic, the typical white household had 9.2 times more wealth than the typical black household and 5.1 times more than the typical Hispanic household, again, according to the census report. So please don't be fooled by this, guys. You're literally, you're ignoring black women in favor of this white felon? No, follow the black women. Follow the good black women, the feminist black women. They know what's going on. They've led all of these revolutionary movements from the start because they've had to. They've had to. It was existential. Feel that. Join them, because it's existential for you too. In other tea, June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And what can I say? The daddies are not doing okay. Okay, we're gonna read some stats. Brace yourselves. They're not good. Suicide. In 2022, men died by suicide 3.85 times more than women. White males accounted for 68.46% of suicide deaths in 2022. So that's with respect to women, but the rates have been increasing pretty steadily for men and much faster for men. There's also a loneliness epidemic. Research conducted in 2021 found that 15% of men claim that they have no close friends, a staggering 12% increase since 1990. 30 years, it's gone up 12%. That's not good. I thought life was supposed to be getting better in America. It also shows how this whole patriarchy thing isn't working. Sexlessness. Researchers from Indiana University say that nearly 1 in 3 U.S. men ages 18 to 24 reported no sexual activity in the past year. That's a dry spell. And this is from that same Indiana University study. Sexual frequency is declining in the United States. Our study adds to a growing body of research that has reported on declines in sex, said Jane Fu, a research associate at the IU School of Public Health, Bloomington, who co-led the study. The declines in partnered sexual activities seen in our study are consistent with findings from studies in the UK, Australia, Germany, and Japan, showing that this is in fact a global sexlessness epidemic. Domestic violence, one of our faves. 90% of people who commit violent physical assaults are men. 90. Males perpetrate 95% of all serious domestic violence. So don't give me some Lorena Bobbitt bullshit, okay? The U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 95% of reported assaults on spouses or ex-spouses are committed by men against women. Again, 95%. A little bit of a theme here. Some 81% of men who beat their wives watched their fathers beat their mothers or were abused themselves. That's some bad daddy action. It's not good. Male violence is learned in the household first and foremost. You can blame video games, you can blame movies, you can blame what people see outside the house. I'm sure that's not helping, but let us not forget the influence of daddy and patriarchal figures at home on shaping young boys and making them toxically masculine in this gendered, violent, dominating way. So, what do all of these statistics about the state of men's mental health show us? Shows us a few things. It shows us that the masculinity that everyone thinks was working for them in the past, that Jerry Seinfeld, is reminiscing about, I don't think it's working, because men are lonely, men aren't getting laid, men are beating the shit out of everybody. This is not good. This is trauma. This is the trauma of patriarchy and supremacy on the perpetrators, on the people who are supposed to be benefiting from it. And the reason that men are finding themselves decreasingly partnered and having fewer lovers, people don't want to get involved with them. You can't be in a loving relationship with this kind of a power differential. It's like going to the strip club and thinking that the stripper that you're paying is dancing because they like you. They don't like you, no, bitch. They're trying to get paid. They're trying to survive. They're there for the money. What is this delusion? It's like you're all waking up from somehow this was actually working for you in the past. And this brings us to the real tea.
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 The crisis for men, the men who aren't falling in line with this bullshit machismo, the good men, is a recognition that, one, it's super fucked up to have your entire identity and psychology be rooted in gendered supremacy, and two, it's not working. It's not making you more powerful, and it's not getting you laid. One of the people who's trying to really help address this male identity crisis is the researcher and economist and author Richard Reeves. His institute, the American Institute for Boys and Men, was one of the organizations that received one of Melinda French's $20 million donations. And I really want to love what he's doing and the work that he's trying to do. I certainly love the spirit, but he is just missing the fucking point. The point that he's missing is something that unites a lot of these advocates for men's mental health and these people who are addressing this crisis. And that is they're failing to realize that this crisis for men, this men's identity crisis, isn't about men being inherently bad or even masculinity being inherently bad. The issue is that men have been groomed and brainwashed for centuries, for millennia, into thinking that they are supreme. And because they've been taught this, that they are supreme, it's been used to justify their domination over all these other people. And it's like, nah, bro. Sad news, and this is what they're realizing along with everyone else, you're not that special. You're not superior. You're just another human being. And these people that you're trying to dominate are rejecting you. Of course they are, because your supremacy is completely arbitrary and illegitimate. It's based in fallacy. It's based in myth. And people are done. What we're experiencing is people saying, I'm fucking fed up. They're done aiding and abetting their own exploitation at your hands. As we discussed earlier in the show, this conception of man as supreme is bullshit, and it's completely false, and it puts all of humanity in this transactional power relationship that it does not need to be in. It does not need to be this way. There is nothing inherent to someone acting like a fool and thinking they're superior to other people. That's just narcissism and hubris. In a healthy, good family or community, that kind of behavior is not tolerated. It gets smacked down real fast because being an asshole is not cool, man. No one wants to fucking roll with you. And being an asshole in a healthy family, in a healthy situation, means you're usually outnumbered. That's not the standard way of being. But alas, we are not in a healthy, good family in this nation or in most others, where patriarchy reigns supreme, where we have this transactional power dynamic. We are still living in this power pyramid upon which we are all dependent and from which none of us can escape. And that does not a happy home make. Tyrants in the household? No bueno. Bad daddies? Disasters. Generational trauma-inducing tornadoes of destruction. In his book, where he lays out his thesis about what he thinks is going on with this male identity crisis, he doesn't call it that, and with what he thinks are solutions. Reeves is basically laying out policy solutions without addressing the reality of masculinity and masculinity politics and identity. And it's kind of shocking to watch an economist be so blind to incentive structures and modeling as it pertains to psychology. Reeves is really clinging to this biological essentialism and this kind of patriarchically defined evolutionary imperative of men to spread their seed. And he's arguing that because of that, men are therefore more aggressive, more likely to take risk, and always want to have sex all the time. These are kind of his three ideas of what masculinity means. He acknowledges, inaccurately and without full comprehension of human psychology or an understanding of gender, that while nurture plays a big role in how we behave and how men behave, it is fragile due to these underlying biological influences. Listen, of course natural differences exist. Of course female and male and intersex brains have some structural differences, and hormones are real as fuck. No one's arguing that. But our brains are continuously being rewired with every neuron fired, every idea, every light bulb moment, every new trauma experienced. And that begins the moment we come out of the womb. So this notion that our natures aren't influenced by a lifetime of patriarchal indoctrination from every friggin' front, be influenced by nurture, is laughable, outdated, and untrue. Also, his critique of toxic masculinity is completely miscalculated. So he maps masculinity onto biology as an expression of this biological maleness that he defines to be something like increased aggressiveness, increased risk-taking, and an increased sex drive. Because to him and to patriarchy at large, masculinity is biologically determined rather than just a collection of traits that even he, Reeves, concedes all genders can possess. And because of this bioessentialism, he and many men and boys think that masculinity is one specific thing, and that, secondly, it is something intrinsic to them, something inside them, his words. And according to this logic, If masculinity is toxic, then so must be the men, because that is their menness, their maleness. This is why Reeves finds the term toxic masculinity to be counterproductive, because he's saying, oh, well, you're just hating on men for who they are and they can't help it. But masculinity, healthy or toxic, does not define maleness. It is not inherently gender. It does not directly map onto men. Pick a trait that's masculine, and you can find any number of people who also possess that trait. It's just a collection of traits. You go through childbirth and tell me that women aren't strong. What about courage, another popular masculine trait? You survive in a world in which you are structurally fucked at every turn. Come on. These are not bioessential, gendered, mapped onto my gonads concepts. Masculinity is a socially dictated array of performances of this particular domineering gender. Toxic masculinity is just a collection of traits that men largely have been ingrained to think is their identity for all of this time, that just reflects male supremacy, this aesthetic of men being dominant over everybody else. That's what toxic masculinity is. And it is called toxic because it is. And that's why, for example, it can be blamed for this whole hodgepodge, as he calls it, of behaviors. He's like, well, how could it be like a specific thing if you just blame it for everything? Well, here's why. He writes, lacking any coherent or consistent definition, the phrase now refers to any male behavior that the user disapproves of, from the tragic to the trivial. And remember, his friggin' definition of masculinity doesn't have any coherence either. It has been blamed for, among other things, mass shootings, gang violence, rape, online trolling, climate change, the financial crisis, Brexit, and the election of Donald Trump, and an unwillingness to wear a mask during the COVID-19 pandemic. He's basically saying, like, what is this term that it's just being used as an excuse for all of these things? Well, these things he just listed are all performances, or the result of performances, of gendered supremacy and domination culture at large. Why is a boy shooting up a school an example of toxic masculinity? Because what the boy is doing is he's asserting what he thinks is his God or biology or whatever given dominance over all of those other people. Why are financial crises examples of toxic masculinity? Well, because in trying to dominate everyone around them, in capitalism, actors are rewarded for hoarding wealth through any means they can get away with, thereby creating unsustainable financial forces that will eventually fail. It's again this idea of dominating everyone else, having the most money, hoarding. And why is climate change an example of toxic masculinity? Because in a race to hoard as much capital as possible, things that weren't commodified or that were not included as costs or losses in this whole calculation of wealth, they were externalized, the most convenient fucking economic term in the fucking world. You know, like air pollution and water fucking contamination and microplastics in our bloodstream. They're all a result of the same aesthetic of domination and supremacy. And as any radical, revolutionary, third wave, intersectional feminist will tell you and explain to you, should you actually listen or seek out their advice, mon Dieu, gender supremacy, this toxic male masculinity, goes hand in hand with financial and wealth supremacy, racial supremacy, religious, in the US, Christian supremacy. And that's what we mean by intersectionality. So some of these things that Reeves is mentioning may seem a little more something else at first, but understand that it is rooted in this entire big, all-encompassing aesthetic of domination and supremacy culture, with men being the legitimate actors in it. Furthermore, as any third wave feminist will readily tell you, toxic masculinity can be perpetrated not just by men, but also by women. Because it's not mapped onto your actual sex. It is not bioessential. And because these traits are not bioessential, they can be and are perpetrated by whomever thinks they stand to have something to gain from them. This can include mommy in addition to daddy, or without daddy. And it certainly includes every fucking chick in the Republican Party. Richard, this is Feminism 101. Have you even read Bell Hooks' Feminism is for Everybody or All About Love, where she addresses the male identity crisis that exists in patriarchy? If you haven't read Bell Hooks' Feminism is for Everybody, everyone, anyone watching, anyone who's not watching, you gotta read this book. You've gotta read Feminism is for Everybody. Bell Hooks wrote this as a primer to help introduce us to all of these concepts, and it's a very concise and short read. It's very accessible. It's about 100 pages long, and it's a little horrifying that people who are trying to fix men and address a gender situation haven't even cracked it. The real crisis for men is not just that they're falling behind in school or in the job market or that they're feeling lonelier and lonelier. The real crisis for men is that men are failing because patriarchal supremacist masculinity is failing men. Men have run smack into the wall of limitations of what patriarchy has to offer them. If your entire identity as a man is domination through acquiring surplus wealth, babies, etc., then you are in a constant state of competition with every other man around you who is also trying to fill this very same exact thing in his life. You are in direct competition with every other man who has the same exact goal as you in this endless pursuit of more. And the women and children in this equation, they're just fucking collateral. They're just there as more assets or tools to help you in your pursuits. Why do you think they're starting to fucking reject it? And that is what we're witnessing right now in this male identity crisis. It is a rejection of this domination and supremacy model by women and queers and people of color in the racialized versions, etc. Straight cis men are showing up to play a game and they're finding out the other team is no longer there to play. And because men have been so indoctrinated with this single identity of domination, they're starting to look around at their lives and realizing that this fulfillment that they were promised is not existing. It's not fucking there. And they're starting to look around and wonder how the hell to proceed. There's no direction. The model is failing them. What Reeves is really doing in this book is demonstrating that he does not understand how humans work. He writes, the male malaise is not the result of a mass psychological breakdown, but of deep structural challenges. Where do you think these structures come from? Divine right? Biology? No! They come from a fucked up mass psychology. It's not the breakdown of the psychology of supremacy. It's the confrontation between this psychology, this problematic psychology, and the fact that it works for no one, including, as we're finally now starting to realize, men. This is the mental health crisis facing men. They've been raised to be supremacists, and that's tantamount to being raised to be a piece of shit. And again, this isn't something inherent to maleness. It's something that has been codified into this very structures that Reeves is addressing. Reeves just doesn't understand patriarchy, that it's not some biological phenomenon, that it is contrived, it is political, it is historical, it has an actual historic beginning, as we talked about earlier in the show. And failing to understand decades, centuries really, of feminist and queer scholarship on the 4,000 to 5,000 years of this systematized male supremacy that is patriarchy. I'm going to use my coarse little phrase here, je m'excuse, Richard, but your failure to do this, to understand this scholarship, this academic whole history of research, it means you're either stupid or you're malicious. And what I mean by this, in his gross oversight in his book on gender to address this whole history of patriarchy and all of the scholarship, is either because maybe he hasn't had the opportunity to study it, even though he totally references a lot of fucking feminists, oftentimes incorrectly, or he's someone maybe who can't see clearly from within the pyramidal power structure that is patriarchy, maybe someone who hasn't been compelled to for existential reasons or seen the need to, anecdotally, or he just hates women and he doesn't see the need to address that male supremacy exists. I don't want to ascribe malicious intentions to him, but it's a big fucking problem in this book. I mean, listen, it is wonderful to see that he wants, and so many people want to help men and boys. We all do, by the way. Angry, disenfranchised men help no one except malevolent leaders and despots. But you can't solve a problem if you do not understand it. And this worsening predicament of men and boys is not something we can merely statistician our way out of. It requires changing how people understand what is truly at play in our world and in the human experience. We all know that history is written by the victors, and patriarchy definitely won, but increasingly people are awakening to the other side of this historical narrative. The millennia-long arc of male supremacy and all its little cohorts, daddy gods, now capitalist supremacy, and as it worked out certainly in America, white supremacy. And because he's a policy guy, the solutions Reeves proposes are formulated as policy changes. The big three being changing early childhood education to be better suited for boys who show a little bit of biological difference in early childhood. That's great. No one's arguing that. Encouraging men to go into fields that have been historically and financially dismissed as feminine, so degendering the workplace, also huge fans, enormous, huge. And lastly, bolstering fatherhood as a social institution, so literally having fathers be actual parents to their children. All of these changes are included and suggested by radical, revolutionary, third wave, intersectional feminism. Because he's a policy guy who's clearly never studied feminist or queer social theory, nowhere in his book does he define masculinity or offer a constructive model of it. He dismisses toxic masculinity by writing how it's lacking in a coherent or consistent definition. Okay then, so what is masculinity? He can't define it because he doesn't understand it. Even if we take these qualities to be non-toxic and take his word for it that they're somehow bioessential, how do these policy solutions that he proposes even track as logical channelings for these traits, let alone solve the male existential identity crisis? I mean, if he had proposed that straight cis men take up sex work to kind of address these internal biological aggression, risk-taking, sex-driven impulses, then maybe then I'd take him a little more seriously. That we all, men, women, non-binary people, children, are suffering from the world around us, that's a pretty good indication that this whole goddamn thing needs to change. And that men's suffering is just the yang to our yin. Until we change our thinking, then structurally, the men and the boys will remain broken, and the women and the girls will continue to eat their shit as a result, because that's behind all of the policies out there for us to live our lives by. It does not have to be like this, especially now that we're all connected and we know that that thing over there isn't some fucking monster. It's just another person who's maybe a little different, but also not really that different. What institutes like Reeves should be doing is engaging with philosophers and human psychobehavioral analysts that have been studying how we've all been brainwashed into patriarchy. His board at the American Institute of Boys and Men, I looked it up, it's almost all dudes, and all of them are either economists, policy analysts, or statisticians and researchers. There's not one feminist scholar, there's not one philosopher, there's not one psychologist, and we're not gonna solve this crisis of men and boys without them. It's suspiciously like he doesn't want to listen to women, or he thinks he's above it. Leadership is another thing that we only seem to understand within this domination power structure model. To lead is ultimately to dominate. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, in patriarchy it is, but it doesn't have to be like that. Because in a system where the leader isn't revered as supreme and where we actually take into account our true natures instead of these imposed constructs like gender and everything fucking else, the leader would actually be respected. We would respect the leader and the guidance instead of just submitting to their power. Back to daddies. You still with me, daddies? We still there? Masculinity is modeled by the daddy. We have daddy rulers, the male rulers who reign supreme and are revered and are like these paternal figures to everybody. We have daddy gods. Same thing. Seriously, we've allowed politically fabricated religions to declare that the father is the creator of life. What? And we have daddies at home. Daddies who are told they're patriarchs and meant to rule over the family. Daddies who get to have their names on the baby of the woman who just incubated and birthed and now is more often than not the primary caretaker of the kin. And the performance of masculinity is just as arbitrary. Toughness, stoicism, control, domination. Like, dude, you're allowed to just be a real person. You're allowed to have feelings. You're allowed to have more than just these fucking crazy things. And parents, let your boys be full humans and stop beating them in all of these parts of themselves into submission. We cannot solve this identity crisis from the top down, certainly not through policy alone, because it begins in the home. It begins with daddy. It begins with daddy and mommy modeling masculinity and this very limited, this very toxic role of what a boy should be. These changes have to happen at the daddy level. It's got to happen in the home with good dads and moms and cousins and uncles and grandparents modeling ungendered love and respect and care for the community and the family and everyone around them and the world at large. We're all connected, man. We also need to show support of children, not what the parents want the child to be or what the parents want for the child, but what the child tells you they want and what they want to be. You need to guide them and help them make good decisions for themselves, not impose things on them. It will not work. It will be another form of supremacy and break that child. And we need to model domination-free connection to our communities and compassion to people and prioritize this and incentivize this. We all exist and have different desires and interests and abilities and opportunities, and they don't map onto our fucking gonads. Isn't it better to have a world that welcomes and sustains and sets all of us up for success? Isn't that a clearer path, a better path to be who you are without also having to prove this other thing? All you need to do, daddies, is start learning about radical, revolutionary, intersectional third-wave feminism, okay? You need to join some consciousness-raising groups like book clubs and social parties. We're gonna have our Queens book club starting soon. We're gonna start with Feminism is for Everybody, so you can do that with some friends, amongst some friends, grow, prosper, and you're gonna start to heal. You're gonna start learning about these things, okay? And you'll meet a bunch of chicks and, up your chances for getting laid. What a plan, huh? But daddies, you have got to let us take the lead right now, okay? I mean, I'm sorry if you have mommy issues, I get it. But our leadership's not gonna be in some domineering way. It's not gonna just be like a replication of this whole pyramidal patriarchy structure where we just replace the dudes with women. That's not it at all. But it does need to be in a way wherein you recognize on some level that we radical feminists and these queer scholars that I'm mentioning that are missing from all of this, we know more about this than you because we've had to, because we've had to navigate this supremacy our whole lives in everything that we do and in ways that you are only beginning to understand. And you can do it. You can listen and you can learn and you can read and you can share and you can make new friends around a culture of inclusion and cooperation rather than with this mindset of one-upsmanship. Nobody good wants to play with that guy who's just always, he sucks. He sucks. Be good and be smarter and more importantly, be yourself instead of some domineering dickhead. Okay, daddy? And that's the real tea. What is your name?
Willie.
Willie?
Yeah.
Are you a dad?
Yeah,
You're
2 girls.
2 girls.
One's 6 and 13.
6 and 13. What's it like being a dad?
It's pretty cool. Raising girls, try to keep them in line, you know.
Yeah. What does that
Yeah.
mean to you?
Like keeping them on the right path, you know, so they won't stay out of trouble. I was bad, so I was always in the streets, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
my kids, I'm trying to avoid them from the streets. So I try, like, whatever I did when I was a kid, I try to remember, and I'm like, yo, like, nah, they can't like go that way. So.
And how do you guide them? Do you have like a lot of conversations with them?
Yeah, I told them every day, you know. I always wanted kids, but I didn't know I was gonna have girls. You know what I mean? So I just God blessed me with on 2 girls. So, if you're ready to be a father, just, you know what I mean, just find the right lady. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
feel good? Do you feel like you found the right lady and you're happy?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. I've been with her for a while, like on 16 years. So.
Well, cheers, Willie.
All right,
Thank you.
thank
Thanks
you,
for
Nina.
talking to us.
All right.
My name is Rich DePinto.
Rich DePinto. Nice. I'm Mama D. It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
Welcome to the Queen's Tea Party. Do you go by any specific pronouns?
Just he, him.
He, him?
Yeah.
Great. Are you a father yourself?
I am a father.
Cool. And what's your how many kids? How long?
One child,
Okay.
one son, and it was a journey to have him.
Okay.
Took us a number of years,
Okay.
and it was a lot of difficulty, but makes it that much more worth it.
And it worked out.
Yeah,
Here
thank
he is.
God.
He's healthy and happy.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh, fabulous. How old is he?
He's going to be 2 years
Oh,
in
wow.
2 weeks.
That's cute.
Yeah,
So
literally
right around
2 weeks.
Father's Day.
Yeah.
That is nice.
For a long time, I wasn't sure if I wanted children. And then my wife and I were kind of just like, oh, wow, yeah, no, I think maybe we want children.
Yeah.
And then started the long journey.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you didn't know before you guys got married, you're not thinking you wanted it, and then it just happened.
It's not that we didn't want children.
Yeah.
We just didn't know. It's not that we didn't want them. We weren't sure where we it was like, if it happened, great. If not,
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
What was the conversation you had with yourself about how you wanted to be as a father?
so it's funny you say that. My father passed away when I was 13.
Okay, really young.
Yeah, he had a form of cancer.
I'm sorry.
And he dealt with it for 20 years. And, it's
Wow.
one of those things I give him a lot of credit, especially being a father now and
Yeah.
having a disease that he had to deal with that really drained him and taxed him. I mean, heck, I get COVID and I'm just like, I'm like, oh dear God, somebody's got to take care of him. And here's my father, doing chemotherapy and like all these other things. And, if you asked me, he was always there.
Nice.
So I guess for me, being a father, I wanted to kind of be that same type of father that my father was.
Sounds
Be
like-
present, be a positive influence, just being there. I want my son, when he gets older, to look back at his time with me, and God willing, he wants children. And, it's kind of like, hey, your grandfather was like this. Same way I
Yeah.
kind of say to him, I'm like, yeah, I tell him stories about his grandfather all the time.
What do you think were some qualities of your dad that you are trying to, in addition to being present, like that you're trying to bring to raising your son? You said you're also a teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another form of like having this kind of parental relationship with children. So what do you think are some qualities that you think are important for a dad or parents in general?
I think the biggest thing is understanding,
Mhm.
just being patient, I think is one of the biggest things. My father was always very patient with me.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I loved about my father I do the same thing with my son, which is my father he always liked to introduce his love of things. So like my father loved movies,
Uh-huh.
and my father would always he was showing me like RoboCop and Aliens and Predator, like when I was way too young to
Yeah.
be watching any of these. And it was one of those things, don't tell your mother.
Yeah.
But it was that love of it that kind of got me into loving movies. And
Yeah,
I want to do the same thing for my son, where it's like I want to be able to bring a certain positive attitude towards my likes, but not necessarily be like, hey, you have to like this, but kind of like it's that same type of energy that
Yeah.
by me bringing this and being excited about certain things, I know will translate into him being excited, like coming to the park and coming to a playground.
Yeah. So you're trying to model positivity versus like trying to impose something on him.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
cool.
My father was very much like, he was old Italian Brooklyn.
Okay, I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. My father was always like, putting ball into my hand and being like, hey, let's go play ball. Let's go do this. but at the same time, like I said, he was as much as he was very masculine in those ways, again, he was very caring. He was very parental in other ways. I've seen a lot of male parents also that are just very hands-off, where it's kind of like, if I ask them, hey, how do you do this? I don't know, talk to his mother. Yeah. And I'm always kind of like,
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, to me, it seems like that's something that you should know.
Yeah.
And it always bothers me when it's like one of those things that, hey, you should know this, when you clearly, like, it almost to me kind of feels like, hey, you're taking too much of an absentee role. It's kind of like, well, I'm dad. And it's like, yeah, well, what does that mean?
With your students, do you see some of that playing out?
I see both sides.
Yeah.
I see some parents that are very active. I see some parents that are not. Some parents, basically, it's like, well, I want to do art. And it's like, well, you're not allowed to do art. And it's like, but that's what I want to do. That's what I want to go into. It's like, well, you're going into science. You're going to go into engineering. And it's kind of like, well, that's your passion, but that's not my passion.
Right.
I see a lot of that. But at the same time, I see a lot of fathers that, again, will be like, you know, same thing. Like, they love video games, so they sit down and they play video games with their children, or they love comic books, so they'll sit down and introduce comic books to their kids.
What is your name?
Nice to meet you. My name is Victor.
Victor, nice to meet you. So you're a dad, yes? Is this your only child? You have one son?
I have a boy and a girl.
And a girl, okay. What does being a dad mean to you?
Wow.
I know, it's a lot.
It's best Christmas present ever.
Yeah?
Like
One
I
of your
said.
babies?
They said that, but my boy said it to me, and then it's a Christmas present every day. When I wake up and stuff,
Yeah?
I see him, walk to school and everything.
Really nice. Did you grow up with a good dad? Is it something that like you're replicating because of positive experiences in your own life, or is it something you're kind of...
I grew up with my dad. My dad was always there to make sure there's food on the table, clothes on our back, and let us be kids.
Yeah. And then what is something that you think is like important for a dad, like to be a good dad? Or what are some qualities?
Always have time for your kids. Always, even when you had a bad day, whatever, take it to the side. Your kid, you're building them, you're molding them. Talk to them, listen to them. Interact with them. Because I know some parents, they go into social media or into tablets and just zone the kids out. Okay, go play with toys. Let's interact with children.
Yeah.
Just remember, you were a kid once too, so understand them. Okay, we were kids too.
Yeah, exactly. Do you come from like a cultural background that has any kind of like ideas of dad that influences you, or maybe that you step back from?
My dad was first generation Polish. Point.
Cool.
My dad just came with a suitcase with my mom for double shifts. Food on the table. Clothes on the back. And Saturday, Sunday, he focused on me.
Nice.
And that's what I remember.
Yeah, and so you're trying to replicate that with your kids.
I'm trying to be better than him.
Ah! All right. What is your name?
Hi, my name is Anthony Burgos. This is a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Anthony. And your pronouns?
He, him, they, gangsta, handsome, Tony. Yeah. I'm a father to a 1-year-old child.
So what's it like to co-parent as a dad?
You know, that's a
Do you guys live near each other? Is it...
No. So my son and his mother, they both live in Tokyo, Japan.
Oh, shit.
Tokyo, to me, if it was like Japanese New York City, where they live is like Queens.
Okay.
Lots of houses. They live in a house.
What did becoming a dad mean to you? Is this something you were trying to do? Was it intentional?
Ma'am, do not make me cry on camera, please.
You can cry. It's a
Okay,
safe space
it's a
for
safe
crying.
space.
Did you always want to be a dad?
Yes, I always wanted to be a dad, of course. So, next question, please, so I can stop crying.
I don't know what your relationship was with your dad, but is that influential for you as a father?
Absolutely. I still live with my father.
Okay.
Listen, a lot of people put shame on people living with their parents. But let me just say, living with your parents is like the best roommates ever, okay? It's like, you know how like dads are like, who touched the thermostat? It's like if I turn on the gas stove, my mom said, why are you cooking? Are you hungry? Just relax. So
What did your dad do in raising you that you're trying to, that you
Oh
think
my
is
God.
good or bad?
How about I just give you examples of how
Sure.
great of a father he was? It was Christmas, and he got me a Hess truck toy. You remember those
I used to
commercials?
get them. For
Yeah,
some
exactly. So he got me a Hess truck toy, but batteries were not included.
Right.
He didn't know that. It's Christmas night, okay? Not Eve, Christmas night. He went out on that snowy day. I'm not gonna exaggerate the story, but it was almost a blizzard. Just safe enough for him to go to the store,
Yeah.
but not dangerous. Like he's risking his life, and then like that's the last time I saw him. No. So he's alive and well. He's still alive and well. They both are.
Good.
He goes all the way to a bodega, which I don't even know which one would be open on Christmas night, snowing badly. When he came back and gave me the batteries, I said to him, Dad, these are the wrong batteries. My father, holding the batteries in his left hand and the paper receipt in his right hand, has decided to go back out. Now he comes back 30 minutes later again, and he gets the right batteries. And then I'm playing with my Hess truck with the lights and the sounds, and he just watches over me and his two other sons, just having a good time on Christmas. So that's how I would describe my father by an example. And he still acts like that, even though his 3 sons are grown adults,
Yeah, what do you think are some qualities? Like, what would you describe if you had to throw out some words?
Well,
Dad.
the most important thing about being a father is being a man. And the most important thing about being a man is about being a person, more specifically a good person. Also a woman. That's
Just
what
a
I'm
good
trying to
person.
say. Like, it's a skill tree,
Yeah.
right? And the root is person. My son's only 1 year old. So last year when he was born, I was just so hard on myself. I put so much pressure on myself to be like, not just a father, but the best father, the trope of father, the God Emperor of fathers, right? I ended up breaking myself because I put myself at such a pedestal that I never matched it, no matter how many diapers I changed, how many baths I gave, how many feedings I gave him, how long I've told him. I'm like, it's not enough. You could do better.
I don't know if you've been picking up on politics, how Trump's trying, speaking of race
Yes.
and masculinity, how Trump's trying to reach black men and men of color by trafficking some pretty heinous racialized stereotypes between the gold sneakers and the mugshot shit.
Oh, yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Oh man, how much time do you have?
We have another minute.
That's
for sure.
for a minute. Look, there are definitely, even in the year 2024, still Uncle Toms and Uncle Ruckuses out there. And they're just enabling these far-right ideologies that hurt marginalized groups like me.
Anthony, thank you so much for talking to us. Is there anything like you want to say to your son, like something happy?
Yeah. I love you so much. And Daddy's going to try to see you on my birthday. So Daddy's going to see you in October. It's just 4 months. And I'm going to bring so many toys. You would think it's your birthday. And I'm going to be so excited. And I love your mother, too. We all love you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anthony. This
Thank
is really
you.
great.
And this concludes our Daddy's Day episode of the Queen's Tea. Thank you to the Queen's Tea team and to all of the people who spoke to us at McCarran Park, Brooklyn. Thank you again to Slanya for my amazing tea hat, and enjoy Norma by Say Shishi, because we will not go back.